Line plots and stem and leaf plots. So both line plots and stem and leaf plots are data displays best suited for numerical univariate data. So one says create a line plot from the data. So what you're going to be expected to do is kind of choose which sort of display is better for certain situations. But before you can do that, let's practice a little bit making these. Okay, so a line plot, you might have heard it in previous grades as like a dot plot. So that's why I put that in parentheses. Line plots are really just dot plots. So how you make these is there's a 10, so I'm going to put a dot on 10. There's a 12, so I'm going to put a dot on 12. Maybe I'll cross them out as I go. 9, put a dot there. 6, put a dot. Another 9, so stack the dot. 10, stack the dot. 8, 9, 11, another 8, another 10, and then another 9. So that's a line plot. So line plots are good for data like this, where you can start stacking this numerical data. If the data was really spread out and you didn't have any duplicates of numbers, a dot plot wouldn't be a very good display, right? Like and I'll get to that later. But like what I'm saying is since there was a lot of duplicates, a dot plot is a good display for it, because I can see here that most of the data is clustered from 8 to 10, and then maybe 6 is, I don't know if I'd call it an outlier, but it's kind of out there. That's what dot plots are good for. It kind of shows you the shape of the data. So why don't you do number 2? Now I'm going to show you a stem and leaf plot. Okay, so like this data here would be really bad for a dot plot, right? Because there's no repeating data values. So you literally don't write this, but you literally have like I wouldn't be stacking anything. It'd be very silly to make a dot plot for this, because there would just be random dots. You wouldn't see any shape of data or anything. So a dot plot would be bad for this. So a stem and leaf is going to be better here. So let's do a stem and leaf for this data, and this is how you do it. So I see my lowest numbers in the 20s, and then my highest numbers in the 70s. So I'm going to go by like 10s here. So the stem will be the 20s. I'm going to put a 2 there. And then we got all the way up to 70s. So I'm going to put a 2. This will be the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Okay. So let me start off with the 20s. And you're supposed to go from least to greatest here. So the smallest 20 numbers I see is 27. So my leaf would be a 7. And then there's also a 28. So I'm going to put comma 8. So that represents a 27 and then also a 28. Okay. In the 30s, there's a 34. That's it. In the 40s, I have 3 numbers. I have a 41, a 45, and a 49. So I'm going to do a 1, a 5. That's a weird looking 5. A 1, a 5, and a 9. In the 50s, there's nothing, so I'm not going to put any leaf there. In the 60s, there's a couple 62s. And then there's a 78. So that's a stem and leaf. So this kind of shows you a little bit. We kind of have a gap between the 40s and the 60s. Most of them are in the 40s. So a stem and leaf is good for this sort of data. So I'll let you make a stem and leaf for number 4. Okay. So this is kind of what I've been talking about and what's really asked of you in Algebra 1. It says sometimes it's better to use line plots and sometimes it's better to use stem and leaf plots. So number 5 says a group of 10 students were asked how many A's they have in their 7 classes. Their data is recorded in the table. So A says, which do you think would be a better display for the data, a line plot or a stem and leaf plot? So when you start to think about this, like envision making it. So if I made a dot plot out of this, I could do a little, or a line plot. I could put a little number line on the bottom. I could put 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then would there be any stacking of the dots? And I think so, right? Because there's a couple sevens, and I see a few sixes, so there'd be some stacking going on here. So I think a line plot might be a viable display. But let's think about a stem and leaf. How would I do a stem and leaf with all these single digits numbers? Like, what would be my stem? What would be my leaf? A stem and leaf wouldn't work for this data, would it? I mean, what would you even do? You know what I mean? So stem and leaf would not work for this, but I think a line plot, aka dot plot, a line plot, that looks silly. Let me rewrite that. A line plot would be better for this. So B says use the type of display you picked for letter A, create the data plot. Okay. I'll do a little line plot. So I'll go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't like how far this goes out. Whoops. Okay. So let me just go one at a time. 7, put a dot, 2, 4, 5, 6, another 4, another 6, a 7, a 3, and another 6. Okay. So yeah, this kind of shows me shows me a little bit of what's going on here. So, most students got a 6. So you can kind of look at this and you kind of see the spread of the data. It's skewed left, which you've learned about in previous classes. So it shows you the shape of the data a little bit. So this was a good choice of doing a dot plot. Stem and leaf would not have worked for this. And even if you choose the wrong display, after you start to try to make it, you realize, wait, maybe I chose the wrong display, and you can go pick a different one. So I'll let you try number 6, think through that one, and figure out, okay, what would be a better display for that. So you try 6.